Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. Today we've got a special guest, Suresh Nageswaran, who is a colleague actually. So we joined forces with the Grid Dynamics team back in October, and Suresh was one of the first people I had the pleasure of meeting. We were out in New York and presenting at the Finos OSFF conference, which was a real great event. I gave a presentation. I think Suresh, you were in the audience, but seems like a long time ago now because we know each other quite well now. But Suresh, you have an interesting history. I know you worked for people like Capgemini. You've been in FinTech for 20 odd years at least, and you've seen a lot of things, a lot of pains and problems that people have tried to solve. And it's been really encouraging having you get on board and get to grips with XTDB and what we're doing in the wider Jux sphere. It's been great to hear your excitement for the bitemporal story and the message that we're trying to evangelize. It'd be great just to hear a little bit of an intro to yourself, Suresh, what your interests are and how you reacted when you saw what XTDB is and how it works.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy and James, for having me on. A little bit about myself. I live and work in New Jersey, the East Coast. I've been in the financial services space for roughly about 27 years now, going on 28, mostly as a technologist, but then I moved on to do a lot of work for the business side of things, especially for wealth managers and asset managers and allocators on the buy side, and also a lot of work for a few broker dealers and prime brokerage kind of organizations on the sell side. Also work for banks, so both retail as well as commercial banks. Was a architect at a Midwest bank in the US for about roughly 4 years before I got into grid. And I think one of the most pleasant aspects about you know XTDB, especially when I first heard about it, was I instantly saw how it had a use case in one of the most trying, underserved areas of both the buy side and the sell side, essentially, which is regulatory reporting. And this has been a long-running issue. It was an issue back when everyone was doing what was known as OATS reporting to the SEC and FINRA. And then when it moved sometime roughly in 2016 to CAT, which is the Consolidated Audit Trail. And of course, apart from that, there's a bunch of bespoke, I want to say, inquiries that people have to field all the time. And in a regulatory environment like the United States, where I live and work, it's been a long running problem. People have tried all sorts of solutions and have not been able to have a satisfactory outcome. It's always surveillance teams going around, trying to rally the troops, get the right folks lined up, and it's been a challenge. So meeting you and talking about XTDB, and the moment you talked about bitemporality, it was pretty obvious. It struck me like a bolt of lightning. It was like, this is what the industry needs. This is the solution people have been waiting for. And we're finally able to get it out to them, especially from a regulatory standpoint. So yeah, this has been my bread and butter, layering, spoofing. I basically drink statute for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can ask me about the Exchange Act 17A rules or the FINRA's 4554 rules. I'll be happy to talk about it. You know, this has been a crying need for the industry for a while, so happy to talk about it today.
Awesome, that's a
Yeah, I think
perfect introduction. So I guess it'd be good to start with exactly how you feel those rules relate to bitemporality, and for those who haven't heard of the bitemporal model as well, like just if you can run through in your words how you see it and what kinds of requirements those regulations have, FINRA, etc., that relate to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So on the buy side and the sell side, there's essentially, the whole thing revolves around, trade execution, order management, basically from the time the order is originated to the time you manage the order to the time you execute the order, and then you get everything back, collate all that information in one place, stick it into some kind of warehouse, and then hopefully try to answer regulatory questions after the fact. Right now, bitemporality, as I understand it, essentially is this, right? I mean, in a conventional database, you have basically just one dimension of time. And if you want to add to the database, you append at the end of it, right? So you have a new record, you put it at the end. You have another new record, you put it at the end. You have a third new record, you put it at the end. The concept of bitemporality was difficult to initially grasp because here's a database that says you can insert this into valid time at any point in time where it belongs, not where the database allows you to put a record. You can put it anywhere in between. You could put it right up front, you could put it in the middle because that's where it belongs, or you could put it, you could append it at the end because that's where it belongs. So that to me was a revelation because the first thing you're thinking is historical reconstruction, and this is a big challenge, right? So to give you an idea of how this typically works in any broker dealer, you have trades that come in, right? And you might send trades out in sequence because you have the ability to control that. But then when trades are coming back in to the organization, they're going through various pieces of infrastructure. Maybe it's sitting in a Kafka queue somewhere. Maybe it's sitting in a channel somewhere. Maybe it sits in a database before it then gets to another queue, and then it finally gets to you, right? So everything arrives out of sequence. This is just the reality of how things work in an organization, right? So you might have golden source, databases for equities and for options and for commodities and for every other thing. But then when you are looking at, from a portfolio management perspective, you're trying to look at, when did I get my executions? They all arrive at different times. So they all arrive out of sequence. Five arrives before three, arrives before four, arrives before one, and which then two arrives after that. So, it's all out of sequence. And why is this a problem? It's a problem because, when you need to query this and you need to report back to the regulator, right? And there's real reasons why you'd want to do this. The audit trail mandate is a very explicit mandate, right? So, for example, the SEC, the statutory language will read something like broker dealers must be able to furnish a record and an audit trail in a reasonably usable electronic format, and you must capture, add, modify, delete with the date, with the time, and the user, and all of that good stuff, right? So that's what, in a nutshell, the 17A4 rule from the SEC is all about. It was amended back in, I think, 2022. But the gist of the rule is essentially the same. If you go to another regulatory body like FINRA, for example, right, they'll talk to you about, okay, you must be able to reconstruct an order book, you must be able to perform order based surveillance, for layering and spoofing and momentum ignition and all of those good things that they want to prevent in the market. And that's essentially what rule 4554 for ATSs is all about. You go to the Commodity Trading Commission, CFTC, right? Again, they also will tell you that, you have to be able to produce a retention. You have to basically have records that must be accessible, and you must be able to retain it. And these records must show a complete time-stamped audit trail. Everybody gets around to the same things, right? And it's not difficult to see why, because it's not about having the file. They're about proving exactly when you knew and what did you know. Right. So, what did you know and when did you know it? That's essentially what these oversight bodies are all looking for, right? And for example, in a layering spoofing kind of scenario, a regulator might request that, okay, you must produce the order book for, ABC, at 9:30 Eastern time on the 12th of May 2025, and every subsequent change for the next 2 seconds, right? You get something like this, right? And why are they asking you this? Well, they're trying to basically figure out if there's been layering or a spoofing kind of situation. Same thing with now you can look at it. Traditionally, what have organizations done? To solve for this, they've taken snapshots, right? The solution was essentially that: take all the data, no matter how it arrives, stick it into a database, and then run a snapshot. But then now you have a snapshot per millisecond, and then you must replay these logs into a temp table, right? Which is, it's brittle, it's slow, it's error prone, right? You have these problems. And the same thing is the problem with, so anything that is a single which has a single temporal dimension to it, like a single temporal store. I want to call regular databases as single temporal stores, because they don't look at time as system time and valid time the way XTDB does. They look at just system time. When did you hit when did something hit the database, right? And that gives you um, if a back office correction arrives, right, you change the order's effective time. Now you lose the ability to say, okay, what did compliance staff believe at 9:30 and 6 seconds, right? You can't answer that question anymore now, because you've kind of lost that ability. That's the problem with conventional databases. And people, like I said, they solve it through various means. Sometimes they go for snapshots, and that has its limitations. They go for a separate column in the database, and that has its limitation. They go um, for example, triggers. When something arrives, do this and that. And some of these solutions are brittle, they don't always transfer nicely. So these are, I want to say, endemic problems in this, right? And what's worse is that now SEC and FINRA examination teams, they ask for point in time extracts. They don't. They're looking for the point in time extract and the full change log, meaning the full audit trail. Uh, that you have, right? Same thing is for on the private credit side, or the private equity side, or the private or even hedge funds, which basically organizations which file things like Form PF. Valuations, they're corrected months later, right? And regulators now want to see that, okay, what was your originally filed value and what is the corrected number, and then you want to see it side by side, without overwriting that history, right? The CFTC, you know, swap situation is also saying they have SDR corrections, as they're called, right? They arrive days after execution, right? Not immediately. It's like days after execution. Again, now as a firm, what do? I must regenerate my daily position limit files to make them consistent with the original trade date. These are all problems, right? And there's a whole out of sequence thing that is, I want to say, kind of a silent killer, really speaking, because trade messages, you get delayed, network glitches happen. I've seen that. You have corporate action adjustments. Retroactively, you're changing valid holdings. You have migrations that bulk load historical trades after you go live. So, in a in row version or a snapshot model, you end up physically rewriting this history, and you break that audit trail, you duplicate all these huge tables. And that is why I think, I'm so the moment I heard about the bitemporality aspect of XTDB, I was like, this is what people are waiting for. This is, it gives you two clocks out of the box. There's no schema gymnastics. It satisfies the audit trail. It satisfies business time views. One storage footprint, right? You have the immutability, the append only log, right? Where you have worm style storage. but you don't need all the extra tooling that goes with it, right? So meaning if you're trying to satisfy like a 17A4 or a CFTC 131 audit trail, or a, you have that out of the box, right? That's what it solves for. So there is that time travel and the range queries. And I think the best part about XTDB is the fact that you have temporal predicates out of the box, right? I can say, when did this particular symbol or this QSIP or this ISIN or this CDOL, when did it exceed this particular range, for all valid time that I know of, right? And you can actually bring back that. I mean, yeah, you can do it in traditional SQL that doesn't support it. It just requires so much more work. Whereas with XTDB, I have to do none of that. I get temporal predicates out of the box, and there's all this, pluggable storage. You have Kafka, you have S3, and you're able to deploy this alongside an existing cloud data lake, right? So you can layer by temporality as a firm, and you don't need a forklift. You don't need to migrate the whole stack, right? So there is, I want to say, substantial benefits that the industry can get out of this, and that's, that is just XTDB out of the box, right? And we're not even talking about all the lift you can get when you add the ability to transform text to SQL or text to XTQL, as a front end to it, and then take away the pain of legal and compliance teams having to depend on the thousand odd folks who need to pull in one direction. They need to, herd the cat, so to speak. Get a programming resource, get a guy from the project management space, get another person who has access to golden sources, and then try to figure out, where's my data. All of that is a pain point in of itself. But even if you weren't solved, and that can be solved using agentic AI solutions at this point. So that's the reason for my unbridled excitement for XTDB. I think the limitations of snapshots and conventional time travel that cloud databases have, they just fall short.
Well,
That makes
I think
sense.
you covered a lot of great ground there. I mean, I think your experience really colours in a lot of the work, the hard work that this team has done over the last few years, because our entire goal has been to raise the level of abstraction, and all your experiences, all the language used, the way people cope and work around these problems just speaks to muddling, right? So people don't have the abstractions they need, and so they reach for snapshots and uh, replaying other kinds of logs which they've designed and built themselves, custom, bespoke, at every point in an integration pipeline. And it would really be amazing for XT to be at the heart of systems like the ones you're describing. And if I was to summarize, I think what I think the use cases that you're talking to there, it's about auditability of decisions. So it's not just so much about auditability of code, or is the database working as it should, or the application layer working as it should. It's about, has someone put data in that they should have done, or have they made a decision and made changes in the real world in an ethical or moral way. And not all organizations have such strong regulatory requirements that they're forced to do that. But in the financial world, because of reasons, this has obviously become a hot topic, and the amount of red tape around these trading platforms and exchanges and things is just dramatically increasing. And this is the result. Is that they have to keep better track of how decisions are made, why decisions are made. But I really feel like the point of the model can be applied in any situation. And I know we've talked elsewhere about supply chain or even AI agents. The more we give control over to AIs, the more we really need to be able to audit their decisions. And yeah, I was wondering if you could touch on sort of what you think the upside is in other domains outside of fintech.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there's a couple of other domains. I mean, my focus has been entirely financial services, buy side, sell side, but supply chain has many of the same problems that I've explained, right? So for example, you have when something is ordered, what is the pricing, what is the I want to say, dare I say, tariff imposed on a product when you place an order, and when is the bill of lading generated, when is it officially loaded onto a container, and when it makes its way excuse me, across waypoints, and what vessels and what flags those vessels fly. These things are all changing. Why does it change? Because the time it takes for a container to leave, say, the port of Shanghai, on the west of China, on the east of China, or the time vessels leave from, say, Vishakhapatnam, which is on the western coast of India, to the time it makes its way across and ends up either at Philly or at San Francisco or at any of the southern ports in the US, right? That's when you'll find that journey takes about 20 odd days. Merchant shipping is a longer timeline, right? And things happen, right? Flags change, uh, regimes change. The tariff on goods, apparently, that changes. That's new to us. So these are the things that you want to solve for. You want to basically understand, when did something arrive, when did something land, when was something custom assessed, when did it um, get into the warehouses, and then finally, when from the time of order to the time of distribution, you want to control this life cycle, because this is uh, we live in a fascinating world where these supply chains have become uh, prone to what is known as supply chain arbitrage, right? So you have the ability to now bring something to market much much faster, by leveraging the best supply chain possible, or and the goods, the price of the goods, the price of the services that basically the consumer sees at the end of it is a factor of all of these things, and then that in turn is also something that's subject to regulatory oversight, right? So that in that sense, you'll find that these supply chains, and how they are managed, and the events that occur during this entire start to finish, they're all monitored in different databases, but then they're all out of sequence when they arrive to you, right? So what did you know about something when you placed a particular order? What could you have done better? What you can't answer any, you can't run any analytics over any of this until such time that you have all your facts in order, and that you can't do without a true bitemporal sense of not just when something was true in the real world, but also when something was true in your database, right? So that's, I think, one of the advantages of XTDB. Another use case that I can see is clearly in the manufacturing side. Again, manufacturing is also many steps. Manufacturing isn't just where you take raw materials, go to one factory, and then finished product comes out of that factory. It's not even that anymore. We live in a world where bits and pieces are manufactured in tiny fragments, as part of an entire manufacturing ecosystem, right? And profitability of an organization is now driven by how effectively you can manage inventory, how effectively you can manage production across these different places, and also understand what is your normal dwell time in each of these industrial units, right? And they're not even spread over one geographical area. You have items that are started in Vietnam that components manufactured in India, other manufactured in China, some others manufactured in Cambodia, and then they're all put together in maybe a totally different location. And again, given the difference in time zones, given when items arrived and when they leave, and how much time it took to manufacture, profitability gets dictated by all of this, right? Again, how do you manage all of this? You need to timelines, right? So that's where I think XTDB excels outside of finance. There's also insurance. I think in insurance, for example, in the US, you can have what is known as retroactive coverage. I'm sure that's pretty much true in the rest of the world as well. But if I start working with a company, say on the 15th of the month, my coverage starts on the 1st of the month. It's backdated, even though I joined on the 15th. And again, today's insurance databases, they handle that, but there is a lot of ballast that goes into it. There is a lot of snapshotting that's happening behind the scenes. There is a lot of event stores and ledgers and whatnot that you have to maintain. There's a triggers and there's so much infra that you don't actually need, but providers have no other recourse. They have to necessarily maintain those extra columns, and they have no ability to query temporally. They have to create these on an ongoing bespoke basis, right? So this is a problem waiting to get solved. People have tried many approaches before. I think the fundamental challenge was the tooling, because the tooling does not inherently support multiple time dimensions. But with XTDB, it does. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of lift coming into these use cases. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think expressions like time is money really apply generally. And anyone doing any kind of real hard business has resources that need to be managed over time, that need to be optimized. And in order to do that, you need to run reports, and those reports will inevitably contain mistakes because things in the real world aren't quite what you thought they were as of certain points of time in the database. And so the art of data modeling is how do you compensate for these mistakes and make what's in the database closely match the real world as possible, and give people the ability to re-report and understand how things change. Obviously, for certain kinds of data and certain domains, the gravity of the decisions being made and the value of the data being pushed around can be quite different. But broadly, everyone we think can benefit from that rigor, that sort of financial approach to the way accountants work, for instance. That's the kind of rigor we want to bring to the world of databases. So yeah, these are really exciting thoughts. Yeah, we have in theory co-written we have co-written a paper, although I think you did most of the hard work, on accelerating regulatory remediation with agentic AI, and you touched on this already with text to SQL generation. But I was curious to hear your thoughts and perspectives on what it takes for AI to succeed, and whether you think XT can help more than just as a bridge to the regulatory side, but do you see potential there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I think it's the very fact that you're dealing with multiple sources of information, right? And there's all these, each source has its own schema, right? And that's also another challenge, right? You have schema changes that happen constantly, and now you're required to keep track of not just the sources, but also the schema of those sources as on a particular point in time. So one example I think was around how precision of information can change, and it has changed over the years. You will have plenty of cases where FINRA or the SEC or the CFTC, they've kind of mandated, okay, you're now handling this new type of product. This precision isn't adequate to represent what this means. You need to, go from, say having 10,2 to, 12, 20, something of that nature. And this usually happens, like, for example, cryptocurrencies, right? Cryptocurrencies weren't traded as actively at one point, right? So you had all these mainframe copybooks which had COBOL descriptions of what the precision of that field should be, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden now you have changes around around that level of precision needed for a particular product, because it is say crypto based, right? And you might need a fraction of, or you might need double floats, or you might need some kind of extra precision, basically, right? To represent that fractional amount that you're trading in, that you're unit priced or whatever, right? And that becomes a challenge because again, schemas have changed, but they changed at a particular point in time. Now you're faced with a regulatory inquiry as to, can you reconstruct this period for us and what you knew about that period? That's great, I brought it back. Now the regulator has a follow-up question as to, why is precision missing on some of these things? What's up with that, right? And you have to be able to explain that. Critical truth can be prevented. You don't have to have someone physically explain it to you. You can look at a schema managed, say, through XTDB, which I think that's another benefit, right? You're able to import documents without actually having to create tables. You're able to infer schema. You're able to also point out historically, when a particular schematic element existed and when it didn't. That becomes an additional point of why this makes great sense in this context. So, from an agentic perspective, I think, uh, uh, if you're able to use, say, the agent that you're creating to, kind of use an MCP server, hook into XTDB, pull out that schema information, use XTDB to manage that schema and write those temporal queries, right? It makes it so much easier, right? So, the idea being that people on the legal and compliance side who normally talk to regulators, they're not great SQL writers, and they're even, and you know what, if you're going to throw an additional XTQL, no matter how powerful it is, it still is a problem for them because they still don't know how to use the power behind it. But then the use of an agentic interface to transfer, to take intent and you convert it into XTQL or SQL that can be executed across data sources, that is invaluable, right? So, which is why this uh, service offering, this product, not product, I would say more of a approach, is so powerful, right? You take agentic AI on the front end, understand from a regulatory perspective what the intent is, what do they want ultimately, figure out where that content is, grab it, and then run a historical reconstruction using XDDB's inherent capabilities, and then you publish the output in the way that the regulator needs it, right? And of course, you have a human in the loop behind all of these things. My personal take is that I'm very gung ho about agents and LLMs in general, but I also recognize the severe limitations that exist in these kind of solutions. They are inherently brittle. So I would never go around suggesting that you use this in a context, especially in a regulatory context, without a human in the loop interface, without also the guardrails that you need to put around it, lock down that solution. Then you can make something that's actually usable in production, something that is trained, because as you acquire more training data, the model gets better. Something outside the training data, obviously the model is going to fail, which is why you see many of these AI solutions, they work 20 times and then number 21 fails because why? The data wasn't in the training data set, and you have this problem, right? So again, uh, with using it for a very limited narrow purpose, like translating text into SQL or translating text into XTQL, is a great utility, great use of it. It's also probably, with guardrails, a more reliable way of getting to the final product. You still need a human in the loop to make sure number 21 wasn't actually wrong, but then you will be able to generate what the regulator wants that much faster. That level of acceleration is not possible in any other way today. It's just not. And this offers a whole new, I want to say, ability for legal and compliance teams in buy side and sell side organizations to kind of accelerate what they're doing, make their lives easier.
Yeah, I suppose from the regulator's point of view, it's a trade off. Do you want something that's, let's say, 99% chance of being right the first time, but it's going to take 3 days. In fact, 99 is optimistic. Let's say 90% chance of being completely right, but it's going to take 3 days. Or would you want something that's 85% chance of being right, but it's available within like 5 minutes or something, and then it gives everyone a chance to go around the loop again if there is a mistake in the way it's been reported. I think that's an interesting balance to make, but certainly in many of these financial situations, there are so many systems that need to be queried. There's never enough engineers to cover all of it, to pull out data and write custom one-off reports. You can imagine that there is an optimum point at which the AI can probably do a good enough job first time round that it's worth everyone's time and energy to make that work. And I think that's an exciting potential to explore, because undoubtedly there's a huge amount of waste in people just copying data around, probably going into Excel, moving columns, etc. On the one hand, and that's within the firms, and then on the regulators, they're probably like, well, we know this is an imposition, so we're only going to ask for these reports once in a blue moon, and therefore it's not so effective. Whereas if they can ask for the reports more frequently, the regulation would have more purpose. It'd be more effective. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good use case.
When it comes to explainable AI, I think you make a great point because it's becoming an increasing demand. Organically, I was at a wealth management conference in Philly last week, right? And the biggest challenge, I mean, I ran into a bunch of wealth managers running all kinds of client-facing use cases using Gen AI and so on, right? And my first question was, what kind of models are you using? What kind of intrinsic white box explainability are you using, or do you have any kind of post hoc, like a black box explainer of what happened, right? And uh, the what came out was that, yeah, these, what, we admit these things are kind of brittle, but we don't use them for anything other than explaining very narrowly, what a customer wants from a front office perspective, right? What is my current balance? What is maximum drawdown I experienced in the last 12 months? You can ask simple questions like that. But if you throw a performance attribution report and you say, okay, look at this Brinson analysis of my portfolio, and why don't you explain to me why the fixed income portion of this has the fixed income sleeve of this has underperformed, say, such and such index, right? And that will probably give you a very different response. And it's not always compliant because, again, in the US, again, when you make a representation about performance, especially from portfolio perspective, you're subject to FINRA, I think, 2330, I think it's called 2334. I'm not certain of the number, but it's essentially basically to say that, okay, you have to stand behind your representation. If you say that I underperformed or I overperformed by X or Y or Z, that becomes something that they don't really care if it was an AI that made that determination or you did it. You're still liable for it as a fiduciary, right? So those are some of the challenges, I think. Though there are now what we call explainability models like Lime and SHAP, which I think is the Shapley model. There is something called the line model, which is the local explainable model, right? So you take a bunch of points and then you explain why contextually this prediction that you made is accurate, right? So that's like a local interpretable model agnostic explanation. I think it's a word jumble of that, but that's roughly what it means. But those are the ones that you want to use. You want to be able to use models that you can explain, models that generate a high level of confidence that you can generate a confidence score against and say, okay, this is at a 99.9 kind of confidence level, this is what it is, or 90.95, 90, or sorry, 95.6, basically an alpha of 5. So what are you looking at, from a confidence perspective, and then basically be able to say that, this is how confident I am that this output is correct, which is why you need the human in the loop at the end of it to kind of verify all of that, right? But the good news is that you have models that are now trainable enough, small enough, trainable enough that you can train on data of a certain sort, and they get to incredibly high levels of confidence based off of that. You can use the right kind of guardrails around it, and you can make it even safer. But that's what it's going to take, I think, at this point.
Well, I definitely can see that an explainable model really needs to be working with explainable data, or maybe using an explainable database. Maybe I'll sit on that one for a bit more. But yeah, I think the task with all of these tools is if they're going to generate a big SQL statement, is how complex is that statement, and if that query is enormous because it's trying to do all these as of resolutions, because invariably the questions are being asked about a certain point in time. If all of that complexity is having to be handled by the agent, the LLM, the model, that's a huge waste of time, and it's probably going to make a ton of mistakes. Whereas I think it would be a lot better to pull all the data into a single view of time, which is what the bitemporal model gives you, and then when you need to ask questions, what was the status of my portfolio as of this date, it's a lot easier for the model, the LLM to engage with that and get that right and make that explainable with a dead simple query that's not reams and reams of logic in order to do the as of resolution, and half the data is missing timestamps, or the timestamps are out of alignment and they need to be fixed, etc. I think in order to have an explainable system, you need to have a first class view of time. That's my hunch, at least, and I'll be curious to see whether we get more adoption from that side of the house. Right. So right now we've been focused on, or XD up until this point has really been focused on application developers, people that just want to build a system and know that they don't have to worry about the reporting challenges and the headaches later on. But I actually think maybe the upside opportunity for that AI world is even much bigger than we can estimate or imagine right now. I appreciate that's not a
Yeah,
question.
that no, that's a good observation. I mean, I think that what you're going to see is uh, the industry moving to kind of a hybrid, situation where you have uh, rule-based systems, which basically use explicit if-then rules, make some predictions or derive rules directly from data using algorithms, right? And then encode it based on expert domain knowledge, right? So this is going to be an augmented kind of situation, right? Especially in use cases where it's sensitive, right? Regulatory use cases are especially sensitive. I would say there are certain use cases which improve user experience on a channel like a website or a IVR or a contact center. And then there are certain others that are regulator facing, or they are more sensitive, from a document perspective or from a tax perspective, right? When things get serious and money or reputation is on the line, right? That's where I think you're going to need far more explainable systems. There's a lot of research going on even now about explainable AI. Uh, what I think is going to happen is you'll still need the explainable, the front end that can explain a lot of these things, and then you need a back end that can provide the facts. And XTDB is what is, I think, going to be the anchor for some of these things, simply because it provides the facts as of, right. So you can ask it a very particular question as of, what did we know? What was our belief system at a particular point in time? And then use some of these front end systems to kind of, write the SQL queries, write the temporal, uh, you know, predicates and the joins that you need, across data sources to kind of stitch that information together into a readable whole, into something that actually makes sense. People are going beyond this. In fact, trade surveillance, as I understand it, is still a big deal, right? Because you can be asked by regulators at any point in time. You get ad hoc queries all the time. You get normal queries all the time, right? And The traditional way for large banks is to have a large contingent of staff on hand available to do this. You're sitting on your hands waiting for stuff to happen. And then when stuff happens, everyone's busy. Then you're sitting on your hands for one till later. But now what we have the ability now to feed some of that data as it comes in, streaming data, into databases like XTDB and then into models that are downstream of them that can basically say, hey, this does look like spoofing, or this does have aspects of momentum ignition or layering. Why don't we investigate this ourselves before FINRA comes knocking at our door? And that's, I think, that's where the next evolution is going, right? That's where you become a lot more proactive. You're not waiting for the wolf to knock at your door. You kind of sense that the apples are going bad, and you act on them before anyone else tells you to. You throw out, or you figure out what exactly is going on. You investigate things in a proactive fashion. You prevent things, and therefore you head off any consent orders or enforcement actions before they ever occur. And over a period of time, it has its benefits. But again, how do you convince um, people on the buy side or the sell side to invest in proactive solutions? And I think with the advent of agentic solutions, right, a lot more folks on the buy side and sell side are now willing to explore these things. They're like, yeah, talk to us about this. Is there a way for us to kind of reduce the bottom line cost to run an organization of our size, which does nothing but trade surveillance? And is there a way I can provide tools to my existing guys so they can become far more effective? If I can make my guys 30%, 40% more effective on an ongoing basis, that's a win for me. That's what I want.
Well, yeah, I think productivity is the name of the game. I appreciate a lot of people out there will be looking at XT and being like, well, trying to go up against giants like Postgres or Snowflake or something. But ultimately, it's about having an easy API that simplifies the domain model, allows you to run many queries more quickly because you're not having to spend loads of time stitching data together or mapping out the schemas, etc. So yeah, that is the name of the game, productivity. Cool. Well, I think we probably should wrap up, but I want to give you an opportunity to have any closing thoughts or parting wisdom to anyone that might be watching the recording back.
No, I think we kind of figured this out, right? I mean, see, the point is regulators today, right? Uh, whether it's the CFTC, whether it's the SEC, whether it's FINRA, they're all realizing that there are newer ways of gaming the system, so they keep widening these goalposts. Right now, one might say, okay, there's been a administration change in the US. Has regulation kind of slackened? And I would say that's actually not the case. It's very deceptive to think of it that way. If nothing else, these regulators are widening these goalposts, right? So now they're asking you to produce a record and audit trail, and they want it to be done in minutes. If I mean in hours, really speaking, you get about 72 to 90 hours to produce some of these records, right? So you can't comply if you're just stitching last night's snapshots with a log digest. You can't do that anymore. So XTDB's native bitemporal model basically means that every insert that you have is kind of an immutable insert, right? It's fully audited. You're simultaneously, querying along with, you're able to where you can basically answer, what did I know and when did I know it, right? You're able to answer those two questions, which are very, very seminal. And that's why firms on the buy side and sell side are now treating they're warming up to this concept of bitemporality. It's not a nice to have for them anymore. I think it's stable. It's going to be table stakes for a modern compliance organization. So I'm very hopeful. Every person I've spoken to so far has responded very, very positively to it. Many people were not even aware, right? I mean, the thing is, people on the trade and compliance side tend to be business focused. They're not but then XTDB is a technical tool, right? It's a technical tool that enables this. And the disconnect is often that, people are in disbelief that, well, if this bitemporality was so, so basic, so fundamental, why aren't we using it already? And I said, that's exactly the question. Why aren't you using it already? You should be.
Yeah, I think that's really funny actually, and I felt this or observed this quite a few times that developers are like, oh, why do I need to worry about providing my users with time travel? They don't need that. Meanwhile, they're sat there on their laptops using Git all day, time traveling on their code base, and it's like, yeah, if you give that power, that superpower to end users, of course they're going to love it. But no one's really succeeded in making that mass market. But anyway, it's great to chat and hear your thoughts, Suresh, and maybe we'll have to get back on soon. Yeah, maybe after we've pulled the trigger on the GA release. But yeah, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Here's all.
Cool. See you
Can't
soon.
Pleasure,
wait for
Suresh.
release.
Yes.